Here's the key. Psalm 25, verse 14 tells us about holiness. The friendship of the Lord is for those who fear him. If you want to live a holy, righteous life, you have to learn to fear God. And I don't mean cower in fear, but when you know that you've been loved by God and you've received the mercy and grace by him, you develop this deep, affectionate respect and awe of God because you know he's holy, you know he's just. And so because you have this deep, affectionate awe and respect for God, it empowers you to live a life of humility, self-control, patience, walk in the fruits of the Spirit and not in the fruit of your flesh. When you have a fear of God, you submit yourself to the character and the teachings of Christ. If you want to pursue holiness, we need to fear God. But why would we want to fear God and submit to someone? Because we know his love has been shown to us through mercy and grace of his Son, Jesus Christ. Chapter 18, 1 Samuel 24, and a little bit of Matthew chapter 6 today. But first, we need to define exactly what forgiveness is. We hear the word forgive, this untangible feeling and emotion that we so quite often talk about in Christianity, but we don't really understand fully, I believe, what forgiveness is. What is forgiveness? Forgiveness is canceling the debt that someone owes you. And that's why we get a little sensitive when we talk about forgiveness, because we say, oh, I forgive this person, but then you see them and you are reminded by the way that they hurt you, by the way that they backstabbed you, by the way that they did this thing, and really you haven't forgiven them. You've shoved your feelings underneath the rug. Forgiveness is canceling the debt that someone owes you. And that's exactly what Jesus does on the cross. And we'll get to that in a little bit later. But forgiveness is understanding that the payment that someone owes you, you say, no, I got it. We don't return evil for evil. That's the whole purpose of Matthew chapter 6. Is Matthew chapter 6 literally talks about, hey, if someone hits you on the right cheek, give them the other one. And if someone takes your tunic, you give them the other tunic, because you don't return evil for evil. You see, karma is not a law of human nature within the kingdom of heaven. Forgiveness is the law of human nature. You know, forgiveness is so radical because it doesn't make sense. What do you mean I don't return back to them what they did to me? What do you mean I don't hit them harder than they hit me first? What do you mean that I don't hold it against them until they bend? You know why? Because we like to say that we're free. Oh, I live in freedom, but you live in unforgiveness. Freedom as a Christian and unforgiveness can't coexist, because forgiveness not only frees the person that has done you wrong, but it frees you as the human being. And that's what we see in Matthew chapter 18 right off the bat. You know, Peter asks Jesus in Matthew chapter 18, it says, and Peter came up to him and said, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me? And I forgive him as many as 7 times. And we have to understand in Jewish tradition that 7 was the number of completion. So you forgave someone 7 times, that was the number of completion. Then after that, technically, you didn't have to forgive them. And Jesus' response is interesting. He says, I don't say to you 7 times. I say 77 times. Or some translations say 70 times 7. 70 times 7 does not mean you forgive the person 490 times. And then on the 491st time, no more forgiveness for you. That's not what he means. Jesus is saying infinity times infinity. You never stop forgiving people. Why? Because we're broken. We're broken human beings with flaws. We're desperate human beings that need help. And so when Jesus is answering Peter's question, he's also talking to us. Like that time that you feel like you've forgiven that person 3 times in your heart and then they do it again, it's like, oh snap, that's when you're going to revoke it. You know, the interesting thing about forgiveness and grace and all these things that we don't deserve that are gifts to us, it's like we want forgiveness and grace for ourselves when we do something wrong, but we're not willing to dish out that same amount of forgiveness and grace that we want for ourselves for other people when they do us wrong. Let me tell you something right now. If you're watching or listening to this, you are being deceived right now if you think you can find satisfaction in the phone, in the pills, in the sex, in the money, in the status, in the Instagram followers. You're being deceived. And that's the nastiest thing about deception, is deception is sly, deception is seduction, deception is attractive, deception, you don't know you're being deceived when you're being deceived. And so there may be many of you listening to this who are being deceived and you have no idea. But there's hope. Look at the message that Paul gives to them at the end of the passage. He says this. Sorry, let me flip there. He says this. The times of ignorance verse 30, the times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. Right now, we are living in a gracious time, because you may be deceived right now, and there is hope for you still, because we are living in a time of grace where God hasn't returned yet. And so you and I have the opportunity to repent for the ways that we've turned against him, repent for the ways that we have slapped him in the face, that we spit on him. We have time to repent and turn from our ways out of love, saying, no, God, I love you. Your way is better. I'm trusting that you have my intentions on your heart, that you are thinking of me in a high manner, that you want to take care of me. And so, yes, I'm repenting out of love, turning away from the things that I've once done and running towards you. We have time to repent, because it says in verse 31, he has fixed a day. There will be a day where you take your last breath. There will be a day where you stand before an all-knowing God, and you can't blame shift your mistakes, because your actions, words, and thoughts will testify against yourself. Therefore, you and I have the opportunity right now to acknowledge maybe we are being deceived. Maybe America is being distracted by the devil. We're being distracted by vices, and we need to repent, turn from that, follow Jesus, and say, God, I'm sorry, forgive me. I'm turning and leaving that behind, because if we do not in this life of grace, in this breath of grace, then you and I will be held accountable for every word, action, and thought. Therefore, you and I can't run away anymore. Then what?
God's always on time. Patience is a fruit of the Spirit. We got to learn to use patience more. But why is it that when we feel like that God has gone silent, we decide to use things that God has graciously given us and rebel against him? As a matter of fact, the Israelites deemed that this golden calf that they built out of the gold that God gave them, that was the God that set them free out of Egypt. Let's substitute it this way. God's becoming impatient, so I'm going to turn back to the porn. And then you get this immediate dopamine hit for a moment, and you think, oh man, that's the relief I was looking for. That's where I got it from. That porn, it really set me free. Then the shame and the guilt hits, reality hits, weight of sin hits, suffering hits. Oh man, I'm just lonely. I need a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Get in that relationship, immediate dopamine hit. Oh, wow. Man, you changed my life. You're the only reason why I'm alive today. Man, I believe this and that. And then you realize that they're a finite human being, and you can't put God-sized expectations on a limited human being, and then they fail you once, and then you go, wow, I'm back into this place. What did I do? God is always on time. So when it comes to going when God goes silent, God doesn't just like go silent for no reason. There's a couple of reasons that you might not be able to hear God. The first reason is maybe because God's voice is described as a still, calm voice, just like the waters. And you can't hear because you got a lot going on in your brain. It's crowded. It's noisy up there. You can't focus. Maybe you're distracted. If the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. Maybe that's why you can't hear the Lord. But maybe you just can't hear him. Maybe because God's up to something. God's always up to something. God's the God of the universe. He's got it in his hand. But he cares about you. That's why he desires to work in your life. That's why he has desired from the beginning of time, when sin separated man from him, he said, I want to do everything to draw people back to me because I am jealous for relationship with them. Let us not grow impatience. Impatience in our life breeds rebellion against God, because when we become impatient, it allows us to get this warped perception that God doesn't care about us. He's neglected us. God isn't listening to me. God has gone silent. God has abandoned me. And that can allow sin to creep in the crack of the door. Breathe this life of rebellion. Don't use the things that God has given you, your gifts, your talents, things that he has given you, for rebellion against him. Use them for his glory.